All right. It's 6:36, so just to keep us on time, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Um, it's kind of nice to be inside on this rainy, getting to be chilly kind of day. So, welcome again to the Huddle, part two of LGBTQIA youth homelessness. And we'll welcome our guest and speakers, Blaine Proctor and Scout DeSimio. And I will let Blaine take it from here.
Alrighty, thanks. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again. And you probably, for those of you who were in attendance at the first the huddle a month ago, you'll remember that we went through a lot of statistics and data, and we learned the ABCs of gender identity. This huddle is going to focus more on Pride Haven. And so Scott DeSimio, who is our program manager overseeing the Pride Haven program, will be doing most of the presentation here tonight, because she is the expert, she's the boots on the ground, and is doing amazing things there. So we'll start out with the video. We have two videos tonight. Both of them are guests who are currently staying at Pride Haven. In fact, this first one, you will probably, if you were at the pizza lunch, you'll recognize Xander. Xander attended the pizza lunch a couple Sundays ago. So Teresa, if you want to go ahead and start this,
Okay.
we'll let Xander start us off.
All right.
I'm 24. I'm a resident here at Pride Haven. I was staying with family after college, kind of with health issues and ending college, and had not been able to work with the development of my health issues. I had become homeless and thought staying with my family was going to be a good idea. I haven't had much contact with them since I came out, which I did during college. And it was not a good time. They're not very accepting of it and not very accepting of me. I was not feeling safe with how I was kind of being treated. With the help of my therapist, I went to a mental health facility, and while I was there, that's when my family had decided that I was no longer welcome back. I didn't know where else to go.
We opened the facility as a response to the fact that there really wasn't anybody serving that population here in Kansas City. When you're talking about homeless, gay, lesbian, trans youth, if we can't get in touch with one of these kids within 48 hours of them hitting the streets, the chances of them falling victim to a crime, whether it be trafficking or rape or assault, or them falling into homelessness permanently, increases by 80%.
Youth and this time in general are having a hard time with housing, but more of the unique part of being LGBT is there's the less family support, and having to build that support on my own. It's often where I feel like I have to rely a lot more on community resources that are so hard to find. Regardless of just it being affordable, it also there is that comfort piece of knowing that you're in an area that you feel safe as an LGBTQ individual. I called a lot of shelters. There's been some worry as an LGBTQ person to call ones that have to do with a religious affiliation. Not that all Christian people are against LGBTQ, but there have been churches or similar things I've been to that have been discriminatory because of that. And so there was that fear with some of the shelters that would be not acceptable if I called.
We are the largest homeless shelter provider between here and Chicago and Dallas. We focus more on person first model than housing first. There's some qualifications. The word has gotten out to, to the LGBTQ community plus community. We are friends. We do have a wonderful program that we help work through those individuals and help them. What are your goals? What do you want? Is this lifestyle working for you?
We follow what is known as a housing first model here at Save Inc. We aren't going to really place any barriers in your way. We don't think that you can address any of your issues until you're stably housed. So we are going to housing first, we're going to put you in housing, and then we're going to wrap you in services.
The more I keep pushing to make the world a better place for me, I'm also making it a better place for others like me. And I want to be around to see that, especially for my little siblings and other LGBT kids.
So this video was put together by Flatland.org, which is, if you're familiar with Kansas City Public Television, is one of their arms. They were doing a story on a different story on housing, and we started talking about housing discrimination, and this video came as a complete aside from the other part of it that we were talking about. And for those of you who are very activist oriented, there is a huge brouhaha going on at City Hall right now around funding for housing for marginalized populations. The funding recommendations came out for the city's housing grants a couple of weeks ago, and not a single dollar was being put towards housing for the LGBTQ population. And a lot of money was being put towards City Union Mission. And so City Council actually tabled the topic, the approvals, until this could be reviewed. Essentially, when a queer youth goes to City Union Mission, and I usually hesitate to call out other organizations that are doing good, because City Union Mission certainly does good. But essentially, when a queer youth goes to City Union Mission, they're going to be subjected to conversion therapy. So, and that's some of what Xander is referencing there. There is going to be opportunity, could be tomorrow, but it's not, we don't see it on the docket, but City Hall is good at throwing things on the docket at the last minute, so people don't catch on to them. It could be as early as tomorrow, it could be next week, where they are going to invite public testimony on this again. I was part of writing a positioning statement for the Greater Kansas City Coalition to End Homelessness that was submitted today, that asks them to spend 10% of the $15 million that they have to spend on housing initiatives, on housing and shelter for the LGBTQ population, not just youth, but the entire population. So I thought that was a good video to start out with. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scout to talk about Pride Haven and what we're doing at Save Inc. through that program.
Okay, Beth, did you have a question? I saw your hand up.
Oh, I did. I was wondering if the city is currently allocating any money to the LGBTQ plus shelters, homeless people.
We got a grant this year for $75,000. And that was cut from 97,000, or excuse me, it was for $75,000, and it was cut from $97,000. It doesn't even scratch the surface. It essentially pays for 1.5 of our staff.
Thank you.
And Blaine, could I ask a question too, real quick?
Yeah, sure.
About the this hearing, is it going to be on a committee docket or the city council docket?
It's the special committee on housing.
Committee on housing. Good. That's tomorrow.
Well, perhaps tomorrow. They were talking about either the 23rd or the 30th. So we weren't seeing it on the docket when we looked at it at the docket this afternoon.
Oh, and one more question about that also. Does the city union mission get the majority of that money, or are there other homeless shelters that get a good portion of that are friendly to LGBTQ? And maybe there are none that are friendly, but do conversion therapy.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there are any that are particularly friendly. There are some that are friendlier than others. But the challenge is when you take someone who identifies as, I'm just going to throw out an example, identifies as female, but is currently physically a male, they are most likely going to be put into shelter with other males, and which creates a huge opportunity, or I hate to use the word opportunity because it sounds awfully positive, but the opportunity for a lot of violence and assault, bullying, all kinds of things. We had an employee at one time who had gone through, was transgender, and had gone through, had completely transitioned, but pre-transition was experiencing homelessness and went to a shelter and was going to be placed in a room with an older white man who was clearly under the influence. And she chose to go back out on the street because she said that she felt safer on the street than she did sharing a space with this man. So, while some are going to be a little friendlier towards queer youth, the challenge still arises. They're going to be put there. Someone who identifies as female, maybe sharing a shower with someone who, a heterosexual male. It's rife with danger and everything. So.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this, I've worked with a lot of queer youth in the community who've been in faith-based shelter settings, and Blaine is absolutely right. They're placed in rooms that don't match their gender presentation, that don't match their identity, and then say, I'm coming off the street, I have nothing on me, so I need to go to the clothing closet and I need to get underwear. I might have a preference about what that underwear is and how that feels on my body, and so I might ask for a certain style of underwear. And I don't know how picky y'all are, but I'm picky about what is close to my body. It's a very sensitive, like, private thing. And trans folks in those settings are also being told, like, we don't care what kind of underwear you want to wear. You're going to wear what we think is appropriate for who we think you are. So that's just another kind of small example of the little ways that people experience things in those settings that really can be psychologically detrimental to them. So I've prepared a little, I won't say a little, it's actually a little bit longer than I mean for it to be. So if at any point you're like, this is too much, squeeze past it, we can do that. This is I would say a more intense version of what I'll be presenting next week in New York on behalf of Save Inc. for the Ali Forney Center's conference. And so the Ali Forney Center is a homeless shelter in New York City that was founded as a response to the death of, Blaine, tell me if this is all wrong, but the death of a young LGBTQ person who was an activist. And they essentially just decided to work with, I believe, a church and to create an affirming, safe space for LGBTQ young people to be able to stay. And they've grown their services from there, and since then have grown into providing consultation services across the country. So Save Inc., as well as several other programs around the country, have been benefiting from Ali Forney's learned experience and sharing that with everyone. I'm getting a spinning circle of death. Are y'all seeing a presentation? Okay, let me see if I can adjust something here. Maybe it just needs a minute.
Is it a PowerPoint, Scott?
There it is. Okay, yeah, it is. It's a Canva slide. It's some Canva slides. So it's might be a little too high tech. How's that?
Got it.
Looks good. Okay. So who all is already familiar with Save Inc. and kind of the services that they provide? Okay, we got Tex, we got Dallas, Margie, Beth, Shannon, Charles. So most of you. So I will talk a little bit about Save Inc. just in terms of the approach that Save Inc. has is a holistic one. So Save Inc. is kind of working not only on providing affordable and safe housing options for people and providing these shelter services to people since we've opened our emergency shelter. Save also provides emergency assistance for folks to prevent houselessness. So owing back rent, owing utilities, Save also provides assistance with that. So a number of programs here. You can kind of see this is our little campus and it's not too far from the church there, but we kind of occupy this 2-block radius that's just a block west of the Truce corridor. And the reason that I bring that up is because we would be remiss if we were to talk about houselessness in Kansas City and not really acknowledge the history of housing discrimination. If you're a homeowner in Kansas City and your house was built before the Fair Housing Act was passed, you may want to look up the original deed of your property, because it may say that this property cannot be owned by Blacks, by Latinos, by Jews. Kansas City pretty much wrote the book on a process called redlining, which is where insurance companies would go through lists of homes, and any home that was in a Black neighborhood, they would highlight in red, and then they wouldn't provide any insurance for those homes. And that effectively, and you may already be super aware of this, but that effectively demolished housing markets in communities and led to a lot of housing discrimination. Blaine already talked a little bit about the existing shelter providers in Kansas City, so I won't go into that. But then Save Inc. was founded in 1986 as a response to the AIDS crisis. And the picture that you're seeing on your left is the original group home, well, at that time, hospice, right? That was volunteer run, and kind of I just think that's so special to see what the property looked like at the time. And then on the right is the facility now. And there's been quite a bit of updates done to it, which is just amazing. So then as HIV and AIDS was changing, the agency turned right from one that was providing a space for people to die with dignity to one where people could live with dignity. And I think a really, really special example of this that we have still on site is there is actually a memorial to a trans woman who passed in Save Home in 1992. And when we were building our Allhaven property, the construction workers found it and came to Blaine and were like, what do we do with this headstone? And so Blaine reached out to the former CEO and said, is there someone buried on site? And they said, well, no, it's, you know, just someone that was really beloved by the staff. And so they had gotten this memorial for this person. So after construction was complete, the new shelter staff were able to put that back in the ground and kind of do that together as a community project. And there's a lot of reverence and respect for Teresa. And so that's just part of our culture that I wanted to share with you. So we started drop-in services, forgive me, in 2019, just in time for COVID to hit. And then did a small period of being closed and then decided to go ahead and be open. I came on in August of 2020. My background is in, first of all, child welfare. I was in child welfare for several years, working mostly with the drug court population through adoptions and foster care. And then I worked several years in a mental health outpatient setting, mostly with youth who were LGBTQ and trying to help coach them through their mental health crises. So what we were finding at the time that we ran the drop-in center is a lot of folks were using the service. They were coming in during the day and really just needing to sleep, to shower, to catch up on laundry. And so when it came time to really talk about, let's try and get you housed, they were like, well, I have my needs met for the day, but now I have to go back to the street and I have to sleep in someone's car, or I've got to sleep in this abandoned water park, or I need to go find somewhere to sleep. So we decided to get kind of radical about our approach and say the need really is for people to have a safe place to be at night. Let's kind of flip our services. So we began offering overnight services May 4th of 2021. And I'll talk a little bit about what that's been like and the impact. So the young folks are able to come in every day at 5 p.m. They have dinner, they hang out, staff provides a group activity. They go to bed in the morning, staff wakes them up and they have breakfast. And then at 8 a.m., everyone goes back out into the community. The young people are able to come back during the day for case management appointments and kind of work on whatever their housing goal might look like. And then they also might come in for, if it's a snow day, we might stay open, or we might have a group activity that they can come in for during the day. But for the most part, we've prioritized having a safe space to be overnight. Let's see. So this is what the space looks like now. I just think it's super fun. They did these really fun, like different colored accent walls in a lot of the rooms, but you can see there's a couple of examples here of the size of the room and how many beds are in a room. So we have one room that only has one set of bunk beds, so 2 beds. And that was the one that Xander was in that video. That room provides a little bit more privacy if we have people, maybe they have an autism diagnosis and noise is going to be too much for them. We can put them in a room that has fewer people. 3 of the rooms have 4 beds, and then 1 room has 6 beds. And you can see in the middle picture, just a little bit, there's these rolling bins under the bed where they're able to store their belongings and kind of keep them safe. We've got a little, you can see a yoga mat in the middle there. We've got a little quiet room space there that folks can use if they're really struggling and just needing somewhere to calm down. And then our living room is where the orange chairs are over there on the bottom left, and the one right next to it, that's our living room space. It is humble, but it's fun too. We've got an Xbox that the young people use, and they kind of hang out and watch music videos or play movies. The little room that looks like an aquarium on the window is where our life skills staff work out of. And those are essentially the staff that run the shelter overnight. So we have full time, we have 5 life skills specialists and then 1 part-time person. And then we're always hiring PRN or as needed people to kind of cover if anybody has to be out sick, to kind of cover any shifts that need covered if someone goes on vacation. And then there's a couple of examples on the right of what our case management offices look like. And there's a small computer lab with some art supplies. So that is what the space looks like. Each of the rooms that we have has a bathroom that's assigned to it. So the young people are in charge of taking care of their bed area and their bathroom. This is a fun, I love this picture. So this was when we were first opening and starting to train our staff. We knew that if we wanted to create a shelter environment that was safe for LGBTQ young people, we were going to have to really be intentional about what that culture was going to look like. And so you can see from some of the folks that we hired, we wanted to ensure that different communities were being represented in that hiring process. But we also wanted to make sure that we followed some of these evidence-based practices on the right. And I'm gonna just talk a little bit about each of these. And if you have questions, let me know, okay? So the first one is trauma-informed care. That is the idea and the understanding that everyone who's coming to us has experienced some form of trauma. For example, I grew up going to school when the Columbine school shooting happened. And I remember feeling really scared to go back to school after that had occurred. And so trauma is very relative. I think we kind of had this previous understanding of trauma as being like, you went to war and that's why you would have trauma that you're experiencing. And so that's really the only relevant time that you should be talking about your trauma. When in fact, just hearing about something that has occurred that's traumatic can cause trauma to manifest in a person. So we try to have the mindset that every person who's coming to us is coping with some kind of trauma. We don't know what that is, but as we get to know them, we might learn some more about that. We also want to make sure that our space is one where it's not going to be traumatic for them. So loud banging noises, we kind of want to keep those to a minimum. There was something else I was going to say, and then it just floated away in the breeze. I've been in like 6 hours of classes today, so forgive me. Oh, what I was going to say is the experience of homelessness is an inherently traumatic one. Anytime that our nervous system is saying, I need to get my needs met, and my immediate need is, I don't have somewhere safe to sleep. I don't know where I'm going to be next week. I don't know how I'm going to get food. My body isn't clean. Our body sends messages to our brain saying, we're not safe. We're not safe. So there's kind of alarm bells kind of going off for people. So we try to understand that everyone who's coming into the space is already experiencing the trauma of being homeless. Next, we use what's called a person-centered approach. This concept is tough for some people, especially those of us who really want to help others. But the concept essentially is that if we go out and we try to help someone, and we help them in the way that we think that they ought to be helped, we're less likely to truly help them. An example of this is, there was a great TED talk by, his name is Ernesto and the last name is escaping me, but he talked about growing tomatoes in Africa, Italian tomatoes. So they brought the Italian tomato seeds and they grew them, and they grew big and ripe I mean, bigger than they ever did in Italy. In Africa, they grew like this. And they were like, oh my God, we have arrived just in time to save these people from starvation. If only they knew about agriculture, thank God we're here. And then what they found is as soon as the tomatoes were big and ripe and ready to eat, 40 hippos came out of the river and ate every single tomato. And so the Italians who were there offering their support to address the food crisis were like, oh my God, why didn't you tell us? And the local people were like, well, you didn't really ask. You just kind of came and tried to help. We know you were trying to help, but it didn't really help us in the way we needed. So we try to just be focused on what a person is saying that they want to work on. For LGBTQ people, sometimes this means, you know, I might think that they need to work on getting housing, but they might be focused instead on getting a legal name change through the court system. And there might be really valid reasons for why that needs to happen first for them. They might be running from someone that is an abuser. They might be just really struggling with their mental health. So I'll move on. Harm reduction is a model that is used in a lot of different scenarios, but it's used mostly with substance use and people who are exchanging sex for goods or services. So harm reduction says that if a person is going to engage, for example, in substance use anyway, if we shame them, they're not only less likely to change that behavior, they're actually more likely to just hide it and do so in a way that is dangerous for them. So let's say we have someone that we know that is drinking and then they're driving home. We could say like, oh my God, that's terrible. I can't believe that you would drink and drive. And that would be a really shameful experience for that person, when I think that many of us have maybe made a choice or made a decision like that. Harm reduction would instead say like, I care about you and I'm noticing this pattern in you. I'm wondering if there's something we could, if you're gonna drink, is there a way that I can support you so that you can take an Uber next time, for example? So that is something that we use in lots of different circumstances. That also, being non-judgmental with the folks that we're serving, also this harm reduction approach has been shown through evidence to lead to people being more likely to attend substance use treatment. Harm reduction is actually the model that's used when we talk about clean needle programs. Clean needles is an example of harm reduction. If we know that people are going to be using IV drugs, but they're at risk for hepatitis or any other bloodborne pathogens, providing clean needles is a way to kind of reduce the harm that could be caused. Low barrier. We talked a little bit about this with the City Union mission, I think. Low barrier means that when a person comes in, we're not requiring that they're in substance use treatment or receiving mental health before we work with them. Like Blaine explained, we're a housing first agency. And so we're going to try to meet them where they're at, but we want to make sure that we're still able to keep them safe. Many facilities in this community maybe don't feel that same way. Cultural humility. So I think many people are familiar with being culturally competent or understanding different cultures and cultural differences. And then there's being culturally responsive, which is saying, oh, I see that you have this cultural difference from me. I'm going to change something about my behavior so that I can meet you where you're at. For example, my wife has family who lives in Mexico. And when we went to meet them for the first time, I was giving them this hearty American handshake. And I was not getting a good response, because in my family and my culture, that's how you show someone that you're like excited to meet them. And my wife was like, hey, you're scaring them. This is a gentle culture. So we do a gentle handshake and we do a kiss on the cheek. And so I changed how I was greeting people. And all of a sudden I had a lot better experience with them getting to know me and not think that I was like just strong, aggressive American. Gender and identity affirming. This means that if a person is in our space, they may begin to feel safe about their identity. Maybe they were living at home and they were not allowed to use a preferred name, or they weren't allowed to go by the pronouns that match their identity. So while they're with us, they may decide, you know what, I am going to change my name and I am gonna go by Butterfly now. And so our staff makes an effort to know what names people want to go by. And if they change, we do our best to adjust. I think we talked last time about we're not always perfect in that. So we have gotten really good at learning to apologize and correct ourselves and kind of move on. We knew that de-escalation skills were going to be a huge, huge benefit to us from working in the drop-in. So like we talked about before, people are coming to us with a ton of trauma. And so when you've had scarcity of resources and when you're going through trauma, your brain is processing information differently than if you weren't going through those things. So maybe a young person that we're working with is going to have a really big reaction to something like, I'm sorry, you can't do your laundry right now. That could turn into like yelling and a full-blown thing. So de-escalation is really about how do we actively listen to someone and be kind to them, even though they might be yelling and upset at us, and not make it about me, but really focusing on what they're trying to communicate, even if they're not doing a good job communicating that calmly. Strong boundaries is a huge one. In order to do the work and show up every day, these are full-time staff, keep in mind, everyone, pretty much everyone you see on this picture has been full-time. So in order to be in a space like this for 40 hours a week, people need to be able to kind of go home and separate their personal life from the trauma and the difficult situations that they hear about at work. So we needed folks who are going to be able to kind of set those boundaries and make sure that they practice really good self-care. We also knew that from the drop-in, we had been seeing a lot of difficult relationship dynamics and unhealthy relationships, sometimes controlling and coercive relationships. So sometimes what will happen is two folks will be on the street together and they'll meet and they'll say, oh my gosh, I have access to this resource. Maybe I have a phone and you have access to this resource. Maybe it's food stamps or a monthly check and you can help us get food. And then together we can kind of be codependent and survive. Sometimes though, when that couple gets into a space where they're being accepted and affirmed, they're having a little bit more stability, and then the cracks in that relationship start to appear, and it starts to become apparent like, oh, maybe that was just a survival relationship and we have some issues in our partnership. So we needed to be able to kind of coach young people about what were healthy norms in a relationship. SPMI is a fancy way of saying severe and persistent mental illness. So that is working with folks who are having mental health crises. So 18 to 24, and actually up to 30 in women or female identified people, female bodied people, I apologize. Up to 30 is when first episode of psychosis can occur in people. So we had seen a lot in the drop-in that a lot of the young people that we were working with were really struggling with psychosis. So extreme forms of paranoia, delusions, internal stimuli like hearing voices or seeing things. We were seeing that a lot in this community. The other thing was food insecurity. We knew that we would need to have visual cues and some kind of way to help folks who were coping with food insecurity so that it didn't turn into like hoarding or trying to eat expired food or do things that were kind of like dangerous for them. Oh, it loaded, good. So this is a little form that I developed based on my experience in a mental health clinic. So this is something that we do with every young person who comes into the shelter and does an intake with us. And it gives our staff who are not mental health professionals some of the language that they need to talk about what they're seeing in someone that is telling them, you know what, I think there might be something kind of off with this person, but I'm not sure. And I definitely can't diagnose them. So we would have these conversations a lot where it'd be like, well, they came in and they were just weird. Like, you know how they are normally? They just weren't like that. And I would be like, well, I need some more information so we can kind of try to figure out what's going on. So these are things that we see a lot in the community. I would say, especially under the clothing section, wearing whether inappropriate clothes or excessive layers of clothes. I think that is something that really is oftentimes, if you think of in your mind what a homeless person would look like, I think a lot of people are imagining someone who's like kind of like got a scruffy beard or wearing lots of clothes. So that's something that we see a lot. So this gives us kind of a baseline to look at for someone when they come in and meet with us. And then over time, we can look at those behaviors and see, are we seeing big changes that make us worried about, that we should be working with a mental health professional on to try to help link them to those services? Or are we seeing actually that this person's kind of improving, and is that good? So when we're working with young people with psychosis, some of the approaches that we use are that we don't confirm or deny what they're saying. So if a young person comes up to me and says that they're the wizard of the bird cult, I will just be like, that sounds interesting. And that can kind of help them to cope with what they're experiencing. Imagine that you come to a friend and you're like, wow, the sky is really pretty today. And your friend is like, the sky is not pretty today. In fact, it's raining. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure that it's right there and I can see it and I can touch it and feel it and interact with it. That's reality. It can be really, really frustrating to have someone say, no, what you're seeing and experiencing isn't real. So that can often escalate someone and get them really upset. So instead we make neutral statements. Another thing is just having some physical awareness. We try never to walk down a hallway with someone behind us just in case. If we have to go to the basement with someone, we always want to make sure that we bring a third person with us if we think that the person we're taking might be struggling with some psychosis. A trick that we've learned in the shelter setting is that we had a young person with psychosis who was really struggling, and the staff would come in and say, hey, can you keep it down here? Can you keep it down in here? And the young person would say, it's not me, it's all of them, referring to the voices that they were experiencing. And so something that the staff started doing is just saying, okay, can everyone in here keep it down? And they would be like, yeah, that sounds really reasonable. So that was a really good kind of trick that we've learned. The other thing is just like trusting their instincts. If they're feeling like someone is off that day and not presenting like they normally do, we probably need to call somebody in and collaborate with one of our partners in the community to try to figure out what's going on for that young person. Let's see. One of the big challenges in the shelter has been hiring. I don't know if y'all have been privy to what's going on in the labor market right now. But hiring has been a really difficult process. We knew that we wanted in hiring for the shelter that our hiring practices would be equitable. So something that we decided to do was to call every single person and give them all a phone interview. And we were not going to consider education before other qualifications because, as we're aware, there are oftentimes systemic issues that result in people not having access to education. So what we were looking for instead were some of those values that I talked about before. So being able to self-regulate. If you're talking to someone who's upset and you're not able to self-regulate, it's going to be a challenge. Having a non-judgmental attitude, practicing some of that cultural humility, maybe in your personal life. And then the other thing that we had issues with was really getting people in the door. So it was a community effort to really try to recruit. We were recruiting on Twitter. We were recruiting on Facebook groups, including Free Hot Soup KC. That's a group that provides free meals to the community. And we were reaching out to local colleges through an app called Handshake. I was hitting up professors and sending them flyers. We were using friends of friends of friends, anybody that we could kind of get in touch with and get a resume for. And at one point I even harangued my tattoo artist into handing out flyers to try to get some good applicants in the door. And that, I think that has worked out for us pretty good. On the left here, you'll see this is a grassroots organization called Confluence Harm Reduction Kansas City. And they came in and trained our staff for free. And they're super, super supportive of our program.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sorry.
So what are some other things that we do to try to make the space comfortable and trauma informed? We talked before about maybe not having a ton of loud noises in the space. We try to keep the TV volume below 25. We have these bowls in the kitchen that are always available. Yes, bowls is a concept that comes from foster care, where a lot of kids in foster care are dealing with food insecurity from their homes of origin. And so when they come into a foster home, they start taking food and keeping it in their rooms because they're afraid they may not have it in the future. So we wanted to make sure that there was always a visible presence of food in the house, and that anytime someone asked for a snack, the answer would always be yes. So that's what the yes bowls are about. We also know that living on the street is very stressful, and people oftentimes have their stuff stolen, medication stolen, identification stolen. And so we know that feeling the security that your belongings are going to be safe was a huge thing. So we developed multiple storage options of varying levels of security so that people can have their things stored and not have to worry about them coming up missing. We also turned one of our storage rooms into a quiet space. I showed that picture earlier. And then because we were working with folks who didn't necessarily have education in the field, but were very passionate about working with this population, it took a lot of practice in the beginning. One of the things that we were hearing from staff a lot was, it's like I have to reinforce these rules all the time. When are they going to learn the rules? And so something that we talked about quite a bit was team development theory. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Storman and Norman, but there's stages that people go through when they're developing a group working dynamic. And in a shelter, it can be even more complex because every time a new person enters that social dynamic, it shifts some of the group expectation. So we have had to reiterate a lot. Yes, every time we have a new person in or out or something changes, the rules are going to have to be reinforced. So the other thing that we were really trying to ask ourselves is, how do we do the work in a way that doesn't increase harm to the young people that we're serving? Because we know that they're coming from trauma. And this is a recommendation that I have for anyone who's interested. It is a book by Dean Spade called Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. And mutual aid and nonprofits have a lot in common, right? They're both trying to solve social issues. Mutual aid differs a little bit. So first of all, mutual aid projects work to meet survival needs. I think we definitely do that. And build shared understanding about why people don't have what they need. So we have worked through social media and through events like this to try to educate people about the issues that are happening in this community. Mutual aid projects mobilize people, expand solidarity, and build movements. I'm going to talk in a little bit about the amount of community support that we have been able to foster through this project and what that impact that has had on our community. And then finally, mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors. And I think that speaks to what I was kind of talking about before with being person-centered and allowing a person to kind of drive the bus in their own life, rather than us deciding what's best for that person. Okay, so one of the ways that we wanted to implement this in our shelter was that I think that a lot of us grew up with a pretty like clear-cut punitive style of maybe school, right? Like you do a bad thing, then you get in trouble, then you go to the principal's office, now you're in trouble, and then you'll get a consequence. But what we've talked about a lot, and one of the principles that we care about is restorative justice. So in society at large, when a person speeds, or when a person breaks any law, really, the consequence of that is usually that you pay a fine. And we know that that doesn't actually result in any form of justice. They've repaid a debt to the society, perhaps, but it doesn't restore that person's place in the community, and it doesn't result in justice for the people who were impacted by that crime. So one of the decisions that we made very early on was that we wanted to ensure that we were always being equitable about how we were administering justice in our space. So we decided that every time there's an incident that requires some kind of consequence, that decision is being made by an interdisciplinary, meaning myself, a case manager, and one of our life skills staff at the bare minimum is involved in that conversation. And that team is multicultural. So there's always someone from a community that the person is from or represents a facet of that person's identity. So if you were in front of a jury of your peers, but say you're a white female and you're only being judged by white males, you would be like, these are not my peers, right? We wanted to make sure that when we were having restorative conversations with a person, that the person being talked about is in the room. I think a lot of times decisions are made about others without involving that person, and that doesn't help to inform them about the negative impact that their behavior has had. So we wanted to shift that. We wanted to make sure that no one held all the power, which means sometimes, unfortunately for me, that I do not have the final say in these conversations. Sometimes if my staff all says, we think this person should have to leave the shelter for the night, and I disagree and think they should get to stay, then what the staff says goes. We wanted to make sure that there weren't any reactionary policies. So let's say someone, this is a real example, someone decided to throw a bunch of cookies around in a silly, fun way, not in a violent way. And it would have been really easy for us to write a rule that said no throwing cookies. But it wouldn't have necessarily made sense for the future, and it wouldn't have necessarily had a positive impact. So we wanted to make sure not to have reactionary policies. We also decided that we do not want to do write-ups, because a write-up is a way of handing a person a piece of paper to say, you did a bad thing, but I'm not going to spend the time to have a conversation with you about it. Anytime that we're having something that would justify a write-up, we should be having a conversation with that person. So I think that one of the biggest examples of this was working with a young person who actually had been in a physical fight in our space, and they were automatically out for 30 days. That's our policy. They still had a conversation, but at the end of that conversation was, our policy is if you physically hurt anyone else, you're going to be out of the space for 30 days. And so that young man came back after 30 days, and my staff was like, I don't see a way that I would allow this person back in the space. And I was like, I think that you should say that to that young person and hear what they have to say. So we had this conversation with this young person. And at the end of the conversation, we all agreed that they would need to work to restore their place in the community, that they would need to demonstrate to us that they were going to be able to be safe, and that we would be willing to give them a second chance. I'm happy to report, because that could have failed miserably. Happy to report that young person was able to come back, has not had any more violent incidents, and then actually moved into a Job Corps program. So that actually has been a success for us. Let's see what's going on here. So community contribution. We could not do some of the amazing things that we've done without the contribution of the community. So we have been able to crowdsource a crazy number of things. And I want to give kudos to y'all, because food every Monday has been provided by Trinity, and it has been a blessing for us. When the staff has food provided, we're able to spend some of that time focusing on providing meaningful interventions to our young people. We've been able to partner with people for, such interesting things as I just started calling hair salons and said, do you have any old towels that I can have? And they were like, yeah, we can get you some towels. So we've been incredibly, incredibly blessed with just people kind of showing up at the right time and having the right resources. We currently get all of our COVID testing for free and all of our masks for free. And I even was able, I had it on a wish list that I wish we had plants, and then they magically had some at Harvesters recently. So I was really excited about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about the impact that's happened since we opened. So between May 4th and March 15th, there's been 315 days. And it's March 15th because that's the day I ran the data last. So in that time, we served 113 individual young people. We had a total of 144 enrollments, but some of those people have maybe left and come back, or they tried out a housing situation that didn't work and then came back. 23 of the 113 people have been asked to leave the space for varied amounts of time, ranging from 1 to 30 days. Most of those were just a couple of days. But 17 of those 23 people who were asked to leave chose to come back and have a restorative conversation and restore their place in the community. And that is something that I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of, that we've been able to give people an opportunity to make amends and to do something different and to welcome them back, right? Forgiveness is a gift. Okay, of those 113 people, 107 of those young people are coping with mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and trauma. That's almost all of them. And I'm guessing that, it could be 100% of them, but that's just the ones who are reporting them, right? 71% or 71 of those 107 have been successfully connected to ongoing mental health services through the use of our case management, and or just through conversations that they're having with our staff. We've been able to connect them with our partners. Of those 113, 61 openly identified as LGBTQ. That number might seem kind of low, and I've been asked before what the disparity is. So essentially, if we have an open bed and I get a phone call saying, hey, I've got a 23-year-old guy, can he come stay there? We go through a screening process, and they may not be LGBTQ, but if I have an open bed, we're gonna accept that person in our space, because them sleeping on the street is not a good alternative. Okay, So 55 of those 113 young people are struggling with a severe form of substance use. This number does not include alcohol, which is developmentally appropriate for this age range, right? We're serving 18 to 24-year-olds, so we wouldn't be exactly shocked to find out that people are drinking or smoking pot. However, 55 of the young people that we work with have been using something that's more pervasive, like opiates or methamphetamines, and we've been able to keep them safe and off the street in our space, oftentimes helping them to prevent relapse. 54 of the 113 young people in our space were actively experiencing psychotic features while in our space. And many of those we've been able to connect to mental health services and even start them on antipsychotic medication. So we've been really, really very proud of the work that we're doing with the mental health community in Kansas City. 44 of the 113 young people we work with are folks who are coming to us with a diagnosis of autism or a traumatic brain injury or another developmental disability. And I think that number is so staggering because I think it just speaks to the way that systems have failed folks their whole lives up until now. They should have been connected to services and resources long before they arise in these situations. 22 of these young people, that's about 1 in 5, identify as trans, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. And we are very happy and blessed and just excited to report that we have been able to help 4 young people file for legal name changes through the help of some Christmas funds in the community. And just the look on people's faces when they find out that they're going to be able to get support in doing that process is just like, it's amazing. Okay, so of 113 people, 69 have been successfully housed. That's roughly 2/3. And 2/3 doesn't sound like a great success rate, but in homelessness services, this is huge. So I'm not, this isn't my Emmy acceptance speech or anything, but I think that the combination of just providing a safe, affirming, trauma-informed space where people can be comfortable and to help them to move on to the next step in their life, I really believe that we're doing something different than what has already been offered in this community. Sometimes people say, wow, that number's really high. How do you define what being housed is? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. Sometimes we're meeting with a person and they are with us and feel safe long enough that they can reach out and rekindle a relationship with a family member and they're able to move in with that family. I count that as a success. That is a person off the street who has now an ongoing supportive person in their life. Some young people are being moved into transitional living placements. That's an ongoing supportive provider where they live in their own apartment or maybe a room in a group setting, and they're getting daily supports to learn how to file their taxes and get a job. Oftentimes they pay 30% of their income in rent and toward the program. And at the end of that program, they get all of that money back in a check. So they might have a $10,000 check by the time that they're done with that program. They can then go buy a car or do something else really cool with that. Many of our young people are being housed with their own employment. They're able to, because we're open overnight, they're able to sleep well. They get up every day, they go to work, they come back, they get their check. We help them get into a house. And we've actually been able to get some grant funds to be able to pay first month's rent and deposit, because I just can't imagine being a young person and having had that support to be able to say, like, yeah, someone paid my first month's rent and deposit, like just a step up. Some young people are being placed on vouchers, which is through the community. They're placed on a housing list. Sometimes that housing list works a lot like an organ donor list. So they may be prioritized based on several factors. But if a voucher becomes available, they may be housed. And that voucher essentially pays the rent for variable amount of times, could be 9 months, could be a year, could be 2 years, could be as long as they want to have the voucher. And then some of those young people have been housed with a roommate. So if we have 2 young people who are in our space, they're getting along pretty good. They're both getting some kind of income, whether that's employed or disability. We might facilitate a conversation with them about what would it look like if you were both roommates. Then you would get to split the rent, and then you would have a support person that you're working with. And that is actually something that I'm very excited about this coming year, is we're going to be starting a roommate matching program and a roommate 101 course, where we're teaching young people how to be good roommates, how to have difficult conversations with their roommates, and how to kind of navigate making those choices. Okay, so in October, we met with our staff and said, what are the dreams and the things that we want to work on? And at that time, they wanted to implement supervisor and lateral reviews so that we were showing our transparency. They wanted to audit anytime we were asking a young person to leave our space. They wanted to audit that and make sure that there wasn't, or if there was, right, a racial bias or a gender bias or something like that happening. We wanted to kind of check ourselves using the data that we had available. We wanted to improve our ability to partner and collaborate with our neighbors. Some of you may be familiar with the tensions arising in our neighborhood and how that is impacting our programming. I think that is one that we still need to work on, as far as kind of building those bridges. And we wanted to cultivate a culture of belonging. So we wanted to make sure no one holds all the power, that we're having those multidisciplinary and cross-cultural staffings anytime we're making a decision about restorative justice. And then here's just a fun picture of our staff. They did a face mask one night and we're really excited about it. Also, this crocheted blanket in the background here was, I think, left over from the group home, and the young people fight over that blanket all the time. So if you have any crocheted rainbow blankets at home, let us know, because they're ridiculous about that thing. Okay, so dreams for the future. I want to stand at events and go like this more. That's not true. We want to work on reducing the number of times that we're calling ambulances for a mental health crisis or something like that. And so we're going to try to make some concerted efforts to increase our staff's training and confidence in handling crisis. We want to be sure that we are telling our story the loudest. We don't want to wait for somebody else to tell our story and then get the version that's maybe not based in fact. We also think, like, every person in KC should know what Save Inc. is doing and about the amazing legacy at Save Inc. We want to work on this roommate matching program I told you about a little bit. And then, Blaine, you'll love this one. We want to work on big fat raises for all of the staff. Also, Bella would like a pot rack in the kitchen. So that's something that I'll have to talk to the health department about that first, but I bet I can find somebody who's willing to help us with that. Okay, I've got questions.
I just want to interrupt real quickly. Y'all know that I cry like, I just want to say how proud I am of Scout and her team. I don't say it enough, and in fact, I give her a hard time a lot. So I want to, listening to her go through this has reminded me just what an amazing couple of years it's been as we've gotten this project off the ground. And Scout has, I can't say enough about her. So
thank you. I'm definitely a words of affirmation person, so that will keep me running for another 2 years.
We all echo that, Scout. Yeah, this has been really amazing. to hear all of the work that you've
I'm
done.
overwhelmed by what you do and the fact that you only have been going. Am I correct? Just not even a year yet, or is this your second year?
It's for overnight for the shelter. It'll be May 4th will be a year.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I wish this presentation had at least one city council member here. So next time we need to invite our city council people. Maybe you did.
Actually, this presentation is going to be given to the city manager's office. So.
Oh, good.
Very good. Very good. Amazing, you all. I'm really impressed. Scout, I had a question. Just what is the average length of stay for the individuals, or do you just let them stay as long as they feel secure?
So I'll tell you. So we start with a 30-day stay for everyone. Our intention has been at 30 days, if you have been meeting with your case managers, you're reasonably within getting housed, you're being consistent, you're not really having a lot of problems in the community, we're going to offer you an extension. We have to keep our stays within 90 days under HUD because that is the HUD definition. And in fact, if a young person is, maybe they're on a list for a voucher and they're waiting for a voucher, they can go in the system and see how long they've been at our shelter. And if they've been in our shelter for 90 days, under HUD rules, they've now established residency. So we don't want to keep them in the space more than 90 days. We want to, sometimes we're saying, hey, we still want to support you. So you gotta maybe we'll put you at another shelter for a little bit and then do that. If you want to come back, we'll still provide you the case management and the support piece while you're gone. Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, there have been exceptions that we've made that have gone well beyond the 90 days. There's a young person that we're serving right now, HIV positive, just an amazing member of our community, and they have stayed well beyond 90 days. And I am happy to report they're getting housed in the next 4 days. They've promised me, the voucher processor has promised me. So it really is tough to say. I haven't updated our Excel spreadsheet yet to show what our average length of stay, but you're the second person who's asked me, so that tells me I need to do it.
I have a question. I know you've mentioned mental health a lot, but after meeting some of these young people at our church, what about those with physical disabilities? Are there ways that they're being serviced also?
Yeah, we're actually super fortunate that the group home was already ADA compliant. So we have a ramp on the back of the house. We actually have a stair lift if we ever needed to put a person upstairs who had mobility issues. We've served a lot of folks in the space with disabilities, and that looks a little bit different for everybody. Yeah. Were there certain things you were wondering about, or?
Oh, I was just thinking about, I met Xander, and he was saying he was getting services and things like that. So not that necessarily you provide it, but are you able to refer him to doctors that know his condition or can help him with his condition?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to be taking a holistic approach with every person that we're working with. We were working with a young person with an epileptic disorder, for example, and we were calling and advocating with their neurologist for several weeks about their medication because there was some confusion about their medication. So we're taking a holistic approach. While you're with us, we're trying to make sure that you're getting access to healthcare, you're getting access to employment opportunities, we're applying for food stamps, we're applying for jobs, we're kind of doing we're looking at the whole picture in that 90 days or in that 30 days. We're not just looking at how fast can I get you housed and then make you someone else's problem, because when we do that and then they don't have the support of a good physician or the support of a therapist, then they're gonna disrupt and have problems when they're living on their own, and they're gonna want to leave and come back to a setting where they're getting supported.
Thank you.
Tex has a question too. I think Tex, you've had your hand up for a while.
Sorry, Scout, can we have a copy of this presentation sent to the folks who are here when it ends? I just think that was wonderful. Yeah. And you know, Scout, I'm trained in ethics, and one of the things I study a great deal is justice. And what I've just been so moved by is how your program is carrying out the best forms of justice that I've seen in the kind of research I do. I mean, the work I do says that justice is liberative. My goodness, you work on that. It's that mercy is intrinsic to justice. It's not a norm in contest with, it's intrinsic to the whole thing of, excuse me, reconciliation, the embodiment of it, the restorative character of it, the reconciling, the interest in belonging and the rest. I mean, all of those, and that it's built from the ground up. It's not imposed from the top down, you know, all those things, the whole notion of the common good that people arrive at together, you know, I think the program just embodies that. I love it. I just love it. I don't know, but I think Trinity would want to partner and do whatever kind of somersaults we've got to do to work with you.
I do want to say that those three tenets that Scout identified are used agency-wide. They were identified. We created in January of 2020. I've shared this with Shannon and Tex before. Our entire staff and board went through a 3-day equity series on racism, and we have contracted with the woman who is the managing partner of that organization on an ongoing basis. And as a result, we have a committee. We call it the DEIB committee, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, that is made up of both staff and board members. And they together, the entire staff, with the help of this committee, and Scout is one of the co-chairs of that committee, identified those three drivers as this is how we as an agency will embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we take really seriously at Saving.
Mm-hmm. You bet.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that culture is pervasive because I think that all of the staff wants to embody those things, and I think the young people hearing about the staff and the way that they approach justice and the way that they approach transparency and accountability. I had a conversation last night. We had an incident, and I don't normally jump out of bed, but I jumped out of bed at 10 o'clock at night and ran up there in my shorts. And I stayed until about midnight after this incident happened, kind of having a conversation with the young people about their thoughts and their feelings about the situation. And we started this conversation about, you know, if we've never been, to what extent is it okay for us as a community to be involved in the conversations that you have when we have these justice conversations? And I was like, that's a really good question. And they were like, we think that somebody from the community that is a client should be at the table to talk about this. And I was like, that's a really interesting thought. I just like, they're so invested in the community. And sometimes I talk about it and I feel like a hippie or like a communist or something, but I'm like, I truly believe that like we've developed a community that talks about what it means to be community. So anyway.
In the early days of the labor movement, well, at least late 18th, 19th century, the communists were the very best. They were the very best. They weren't polluted by what happened in the Soviet Union and later with China. They were really democratic communists. And it's another breed of cat. Of course, we can't talk about that in the United States, can we?
I mean, my honeymoon was in Cuba, Tex, so I'm not. There are a lot of common denominators between. I was just talking about the labor movement today. Yeah, I think that the culture is pervasive, right? So another thing that we do in the shelter is we don't require anyone to do any chores. If you take care of your bed and your bathroom, that's kind of the expectation. But what we decided to do instead was we were like, anybody who wants to do a give back activity for the community is welcome to do that. And at first it was like, well, if you do a give back activity, you can come in an hour early. So you instead of coming in at 5 p.m., you come in at 4 p.m. And they loved doing that. Or we said, you know what, curfew is 11 on Friday, but you're 23 years old. If you want to stay out till midnight, do a give back activity. So we've recently decided to kind of monetize them, which has been a kind of a fun experiment. And instead of a give back activity, they're called give bucks, which I came up with and everyone thinks is very corny, but I love it. And so each task that they're doing, like say they pick up something they pick up their neighbor's bathroom, that's actually worth more points than if they pick up their own bathroom. So we're kind of like reinforcing these notions. They can actually earn enough give bucks to earn an entire drop-in day for everyone in the shelter.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But we're kind of like gently nudging them toward like caring for themselves and caring about others.
Good, wonderful.
Any other questions?
All day, I feel like.
If there's no other questions,
Donna?
Sorry.
I was just going to ask, like everyone else, I am just so impressed with the richness and the depth and the just the love that is exuded through this presentation on so many levels. And to think that you've only been doing this for such a short time. You know, I shared with you last month that I'm a retired school counselor, and what you're doing for these young people is just absolutely amazing. I did want to ask, and I don't know how you could possibly do any more, but have you thought about following them after they leave and, you know, how they do when they go on into their other housing situation?
Yeah, that is a great question. We have thought about what does our aftercare services look like? So we've offered everyone for at least 30 days after they've left our program that they can continue to get case management services. But even after that, if they call and they're like, oh my God, I don't know how to file my taxes, we've been like, we'll help you figure that out. I think the other piece of that we've talked about is potentially creating some kind of a peer mentor night. I think there's some interest in folks who have kind of gone through the program and are living on their own to want to come back and be in the space and like share with others. This is how I did it. This is how I got everything together. And so I think that the learning, it's easy for me to say like, all you need to do is X, Y, Z, but they think I'm 100 years old. So they are more likely to listen to someone who looks like them.
If they think Scout's 100, they think I'm 150. So
no kidding.
That makes me 200.
So if I don't want to cut anybody, I don't want to, if anybody else has any questions, but we do have another video that we can show.
Karen does.
Karen, go ahead.
Also known as Charles Buesso. Anyway, I have a history of working with SAVE when it was a group home. And there's a legacy there of acts of justice and treating people equitably. And I think Trinity could learn from you all. So thank you for that. And I think my other questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to know more about that, because I think that there is such a thirst from the staff to know more about Save Home and about the staff and about that culture and that environment. If you ever wanted to connect and kind of talk about that.
Oh, sure.
And I wanted to say that it just seems to me imperative that a church community like ours needs to go through this exact training of equity, inclusion, belonging, common good. We think because we have the Bible and a few other things, we know all this, but we don't.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yeah, when I contracted with Stephanie to provide ongoing support for us and lead us through this, I told her that, you know, while this was cradled in the murder of George Floyd, and you know, and was that's what prompted it all, you know, is, you know, we need to understand racism. I said, I really want to move beyond that, because we're obviously not just dealing with race. We're dealing with gender, and we're dealing with disabilities. And so, and that's where the B came from. That's where the belonging came from. It's more than making sure that people feel included, that we say you are included. They have to feel like they belong. This is a place where they belong. So that's really that's where that B comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But
wonderful.
Yeah. So thanks everybody. We've got one more video. Teresa, if you want to key up the last video. This is another one of our residents or our guests, whose name is Isaiah, and this was created for us by a local advertising agency. They created a couple of videos for us on a pro bono basis. It was tens of thousands of dollars worth of service, and I love what Isaiah says about what this is doing for him.
My name is Isaac. I've been staying at Pride Haven for, I think, almost a month now. So I'm from Tampa, Florida, and when I turned about 13, I moved up to North Carolina with my grandma, and she kicked me out to go live with my parents when I was 14. It didn't go well. Parents weren't the right place to be, and I left and journeyed across country to Missouri, and then kind of got stranded here. I have no family to reach out to or anything like that, so I've been staying in a tent and in my car and in different shelters, and I gotta say this is probably the most welcoming place that I've stayed at. Pride Haven is somewhere where everyone's welcome, no matter your race, ethnicity, color of your skin, the way you identify sexually, or your gender identity. It's a place where everyone can come and feel safe. Pride Haven is kind of like a sanctuary. I can go up to my room and know that, like, I'm safe. Nothing around me is going to be hectic or chaotic. I have a roof over my head. There's always meals for me to go eat. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to go eat a sandwich. It's, oh, I'm going to go eat a home-cooked meal. And that's something, like, I've really missed out on, like, in the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 years. I want stability and functionality. That's my biggest wish for the future. And those are 2 very big things that I've been working on for a very long time. But being here, I can kind of take my time to get in the position that I need to, because I'm able to prioritize things correctly. I don't have to worry so much about where I'm gonna fall if I fall backwards, and I can focus on where I'm gonna fall if I fall forwards. You know, what is going to be there after this? and that's making me able to function better. And if you can function, you can be stable. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have somewhere to go and lay my head down right now. I definitely wouldn't be in the physical or mental and emotional condition that I am in right now if I didn't.
Mm.
Oh, that's Pride Haven.
Beautiful.
That's powerful. Mm-hmm.
Very powerful.
Thank
How
you.
is this young man doing now?
So I think I can, so Isaac is a trans guy that we worked with for several months, and he is now housed in an apartment, and looking forward to getting his dog back, actually. He had found someone in the community who was able to keep his dog while he was staying with us. So he's excited to get his dog back.
Good.
I love his expression of when he falls forward or he falls back. And I just, he needs to be a writer. Think about writing.
That's one of the things that amaze me, not only about our guests at Pride Haven, but all of our residents and our clients at Save Inc. is nobody tells their story better than they do, and quite often more eloquently.
Yes.
I'm always trying to get them to speak to folks because it makes my job a lot easier when it comes to raising money and things like that.
They could all collectively write a book.
Absolutely.
Stories. That would be a bestseller. Oh my.
There you go, Scout. There's an idea for you.
In your spare time. Yeah. I thank you so much, Scout.
Well,
and Blaine. It's amazing. I knew you were good. I just didn't know how good. So thank you.
You know, I am nothing without the people that I work with. And I am amazingly proud to be associated with these people.
We're all very fortunate to have you guys.
Yeah, beautiful, really wonderful.
Got a question. I don't know, you're muted, it looks like.
Suzanne, you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Was everyone able to hear Xander in that first video?
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay, because I got maybe 3/4 of the way through it, and finally I was able to do something here and get it done. So I didn't know.
You know what, Suzanne? I'll send you a link to with that video in it, so you can watch it at home.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
And I too would really like a copy of what you presented us, Scout. It's something for all of us to consider and work into our daily practice of service. So
I'm so flattered. I like stressed over this presentation for like a month, I feel like.
Oh.
I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go. I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed it.
Very successful.
It was heartwarming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We thank you so much, Blaine and Scout, for the work you do. And I'll echo that I knew that you did good work, but this was an amazing presentation to really detail out the people that you have served and continue to serve. And I think, at least for me, then I'm just brainstorming of what can Trinity do? What can we do? How can we support this effort? So if people have ideas, If you have ideas, if your clients have ideas, let us know how we can continue to help and support this mission. We're really happy to be a part of it any way we can.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.